Welcome to Wallace and Purses. So today we have with us Kyla Davis. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She is the founder and owner of Infinite Solutions Counseling, where she is currently specializing in mood disorders, maternal mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder, and relationship issues. Kyla utilizes her knowledge and experience in the field to not only create safe spaces for her clients, but also shed light on the presence and impact of mental health within her community. Welcome, Kyla.
Hi, how are you guys?
The inspiration behind today's interview was based off of a blog that I wrote called Who's Sitting at Your Table? And, we thought about how insightful it would be to talk with somebody who was a licensed family therapist about relationships and setting boundaries and being able to work through conflicts. And so, um, Kyla, we appreciate you coming out to have this important discussion with us. And we're just going to jump right in. So, the first question: why is it important for married couples to set boundaries with friends and family?
That is a very important question. I think it's very important for married couples to set boundaries with family as well as friends because it helps to eliminate some of those blurred lines and it helps to kind of manage any potential conflict that might arise in the event, things get overstepped or someone oversteps those boundaries. So it's very important for boundaries to be set, not just while you're married, but even prior to getting married, right? Just having those kind of conversations leading up to marriage where, you have conversations centered around what would be an appropriate boundary that you would like to set once we become married and just being consistent with it.
So I'm glad you mentioned boundaries, right? And setting those prior to marriage. What kind of boundaries do you think should be put in place?
So a lot of times when I meet with my couples, the questions that I ask are really related to parenting styles as well as house rules and information. How is information provided to people outside of your relationship? Is it allowed? What type of information is allowed? So that is a major boundary that I think should be addressed, as well as parenting styles, because when you think about it from a parenting standpoint, everyone parents differently, right? So my mom is going to parent different or has parent different from how I parent. So she might have her perceptions regarding parenting. So just setting boundaries around that as well. You can even go deeper and you can look at discipline. How do you discipline as a parent when your child is visiting a grandparent? What does that discipline look like? How do you explain that and communicate that to the grandparent so that that stays within the realms of what you do within your household. So boundaries centered around what information is disclosed and who is it disclosed to, parenting, discipline, as well as, who comes over to the house and what time are they allowed to come over to the house and just what are your household rules. Those are good boundaries to start to set. Again, in marriage, but also leading up, having that conversation leading up to marriage as well.
So another question I have is, how do couples struggling with communication issues turn it around?
That's a good question. A lot of times we model what we know, right? So when it comes to relationships and communication styles, a lot of our communication style, you can see it stem from what was modeled for you in childhood. So let's say your mom was the type of communicator who would disengage whenever arguments got really intense, whether it be emotionally intense or other factors. But let's say she was the type to disengage, more than likely you may model that same type of behavior. Let's say your dad was maybe the more vocal one, you may tend to model that behavior as well. It just depends. So when it comes to communication in relationships, for couples who struggle with communicating, it's always best to go back to who modeled communication for you, and how are you picking up these same habits and repeating them in your relationship. Once you're able to identify that, you can begin the process of unlearning what are healthy communication patterns and then learning new healthy communication patterns. For instance, something that I challenge my couples to do is have weekly sit downs where you talk, right? And it's almost like the red table talk, like, you know, Jada Smith, like you bring everything to the table. It's a safe space. You express your needs, you express, you know, your discomfort with certain things, but it's an area where you can have open, honest dialogue, and you do that weekly. So then you get in the habit of communicating in that sense.
And you know what? It's so important, as you just discussed, Kyla, that even having that foundation between husband and wife, that's so important, because if you don't have boundaries in place with friends and family, and then you don't have that foundation as husband and wife, do you see the chaos that could happen and like it? Okay. So what are some common financial mistakes you've seen that causes marital discord?
The most common one that I've seen is not having the conversation related to finances at all, like just neglecting to have that conversation, or flat out avoiding the conversation, or withholding information. That's a huge one. So sometimes a couple might come in and they would say, and I'll ask, because there's a portion in my sessions, because I structure it where we talk about each thing that a couple might face within the time frame of their marriage. So finances is one of those things that I discuss. So one of my questions is, you know, what do you know pertaining to your spouse's debt, right? What does that look like? And a lot of times couples might say, well, I know she has student loans. Okay, that's good. How much is her student loan debt? You know?
Yeah.
What amount does she owe? And then most of the time, they won't have an answer to that follow-up question. So again, having those conversations where you say everything and you put everything on the table. So let's say you have student loan debt. It's not just that I have student loan debt, but I have student loans that are amount to, let's say, $30,000, so that you're fully aware. What are your payments for your student loan? What does it look like a month? You know, where are you now? How long will it take you to pay off based on the payments that you're making monthly? Those kind of conversations where it's not very vague, but very specific, very detailed, so you know everything, right? Because it puts everything on the table, and it doesn't leave you on the outside, so to say. So you know what to expect, you know how to budget, you know how much is being sent out of the household based on the income that's coming in. Like, you have those sort of detailed conversations.
Yes. And actually, so in the blog, we talk about planning a budget night. And so, you know, for some couples, talking about finances may be a never thing. For others, it may be a one-sided type of deal. You know, one spouse is paying more attention to finances, and the other spouse is kind of, you know, living life like it's golden, and it's not a fair thing because it's gonna get handled. And so, you know, so for us, when we coach folks on the financial side, we always say, you know, plan a budget night. You know, and talk about your finances, and you guys agree on what that budget is going to look like for the month. And so that goes back to what you were talking to Kyla about, you know, building that trust. Everybody is aware of how much debt is on the table, what needs to come out of the household monthly. Just having that open dialogue, it builds confidence, it builds trust, and it definitely keeps both husband and wife on that same page. So that's really important.